Welcome to lesson 7.3, Confederation in the Maritimes. To what extent was Confederation used to strengthen the maritime colonies? We will learn this and more in this lesson. So stick around and let's learn something. So we're trying to strengthen the maritime colonies today. So what is Confederation going to do for that strengthening? This is lesson 7.3. This is all about Confederation and the maritime colonies. The maritime colonies, we know they are in present-day Atlantic Canada. We have New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and Newfoundland. You can see there on the map. And in this point in time in our history of Canada, besides being of British origin, there wasn't much that these colonies had in common with the province of Canada. They were far away in terms of the 1860s, in terms of distance and time. In the 1860s, they were far away. They had different economies. They were focused more of living off of the sea, and they even had different trade partners. Yes, they were trading with Britain. They were also trading with the United States as well, but they're also down in the Caribbean. So there were some major differences between these maritime colonies and that of Upper and Lower Canada, the province of Canada. So let's take a look at some facts first about the maritime colonies. I'm going to focus on each one individually, starting with New Brunswick. All four of these colonies, they did have strong economies. And New Brunswick, they focused on the forestry sector and fishing. St. John, New Brunswick was their most important city, and they were well known for their wooden sailing ships, which is what we're going to be talking about later on in this lesson. The Acadians, they were up in the north, and they had a large group of Irish colonists that were living there. Next up, PEI, Prince Edward Island. They, like in New Brunswick, the economy did have a lot of fishing, but they also had farming. They have very fertile soil. It's excellent farming, really good for the economy. Charlottetown is their most important city. You will be hearing about Charlottetown later on in this chapter. That's going to play an important role in our story of Canada. They were an island. So they had no bridges to the mainland. So any kind of business you needed to do needed to be done using ship. So this is going to be different from all of the other ones. And in terms of area and population, they are going to be the smallest colony in British North America. Let's jump across over to Nova Scotia. Like New Brunswick and Prince Edward Island, fishing is going to be the main part of their economy. Halifax is their most important city, and it's a naval center in the colonies. They had about 10% of their land was good for farming, so not a lot. So they were focusing more on that fishing economy. They were trading quite a bit with the Caribbean colonies, and the Scots, people from Scotland, make up the largest group of colonists here. And Nova Scotia was home to about 1,500 Mi'kmaq First Nations. We've been talking about the Mi'kmaq a lot since chapter 1. And then the last maritime colony that we're going to talk about is Newfoundland. We know a lot about Newfoundland already in this story of Canada. And like the other three maritime colonies, fishing is going to be their main economic driving force. All of that was going over to Britain. And they are well known for their seal hunting. Their most important city, St. John's, Newfoundland. Not St. John like in New Brunswick, but St. John's, Newfoundland. Very creative with the names, I know. Newfoundland is nicknamed The Rock. And not The Rock like Dwayne The Rock Johnson or The Rock, which is Alcatraz, but it's a different The Rock. It's Newfoundland. There's no good farming land in Newfoundland, so they rely heavily on their fishing industry. And being kind of on the northern part, they are pretty isolated from the other colonies. So their ties to Britain are going to be really, really close. But the Maritimes, they did have something in common with each other. And that was all of this that we talked about. They had similar economies, trading partners, and they were also known for the golden age of the Maritimes. So the 30 years between 1840 and 1870, it was the decades of wind, wood, and sail. Not earth, wind, and fire, but wind, wood, and sail. Maritime shipbuilders, people from all over the world, navies from all over the world were looking at the Maritimes of British North America, and they were well respected. They had the fourth largest shipping fleet in the entire world. Just for you to get a load of, or to comprehend this and understand this, the British had the number one, the US was number two, Norway was number three, and then the Maritime Colonies were number four. Absolutely amazing. They produced and built 70% of the world's ships. So people wanted these maritime ships. So this was the golden age of the Maritimes. And not only were they known for their shipbuilding, but they had fish, they had lumber, and you can send these out to the different markets. And then pretty soon, we're going to see in our story of Canada, Nova Scotia is on the brink of becoming rich with all of its coal deposits. So things are looking really good. The Maritimes are really, really strong. So they're thinking maybe they should join a union, but not a union with the province of Canada. Maybe they should just join a union amongst themselves. Something to think about, which is going to be coming up. It was the golden age, but you know what? It wasn't necessarily the golden age for everyone. So there were some hardships being faced in the Maritime Colonies. And everybody, it seemed, was facing these hardships, from the Mi'kmaq all the way to the Germans. The Mi'kmaq, in fact, the First Nations, they didn't see many economic benefits that the rest of the Maritime Colonies were seeing. They signed treaties with the British limiting the amount of land and the type of land that they would have access to. So that's really going to hurt the Mi'kmaq. And we heard in the previous chapter, when Black loyalists came up into Nova Scotia and the Maritime Colonies, the racism and discrimination didn't just disappear. They were still facing all of that racism and discrimination. And the timber industry, the lumber industry, although it provided an economic boom for the Maritimes, the gangs that were working those lumber yards are called lumber gangs. Those conditions were brutal. They were out in the wilderness and in the cold and the harsh environment trying to make this industry work. So it wasn't really the golden age for all of them. So would entering into a union with the province of Canada actually help, or is it going to hinder the growth of the Maritimes? Many of the Maritimers, many of the colonists, they thought by joining a union with the province of Canada, the golden age would come to an end. And they were trading with Britain, the United States, and with the Caribbean, and they thought that the union would force them into only trading with other union members only in Canada. So we're like, why should we do this? Why are we going to hurt our economy by joining into union if we are going to lose our trading partners? But then some people were saying, wait a second. The golden age of wood, wind, and sail is coming to an end and is going to be replaced by coal, iron, and steel. So your golden age of these shipbuilding industries, building 70% of the world's shipping fleets, is eventually going to come to an end because it is going to be replaced with newer technology, more durable technology, things being run using coal and things made out of iron and steel. If we join into union, some of the supporters are saying, then we will have access to these Canadian economies for when the golden age eventually, and it will, come to an end. So the big driving factor here is the railway again, and we heard about this in the last lesson, but the railway is going to be a very attractive piece in the puzzle here for both sides. Whether you oppose the union or you're for union, the railway is going to be great. It's going to support your business should the golden age of shipbuilding come to an end. And even if the golden age of shipbuilding doesn't come to an end, but we know it does, but if it doesn't, that railway is still attractive to those of us who oppose the union, because the Americans, they're wanting to come north. They have that whole manifest destiny idea. So if we join union, we'll get this railway, and then should an American invasion actually happen, we can move troops within the Union of Canada really, really, really super quick. I want to take a short focus here on this individual who lived from 1804 to 1873. This is Joseph Howe. Good name, Joseph. And he was the leading politician in Nova Scotia of his time. And he owned a newspaper. It was called, very creative name, the Nova Scotian. And he was, at one point, as he owned this paper, he published a letter claiming that government was stealing from the people, and he was arrested for this. He was arrested for writing this article and publishing this article that got distributed to all of the readers of this newspaper. And as he was imprisoned, and he was arguing and making very valid cases, saying that newspapers, the media, they didn't call it the media back then, it was the newspaper. He argued that it must be free to criticize the government. We must be free to criticize our government. It's one of our democratic rights. And he was fighting for those rights. And in 1836, a young Joseph Howe gets elected to the Legislative Assembly as the leader of the Reform Party. And he helped bring in responsible government. And you remember responsible government from the past chapter 6. But despite all this, he was still loyal to Nova Scotia. He was against union with Canada because he believed that the union would favor the province of Canada more than the Maritimes. So he was very much against union with Canada. And we will be learning more about that in coming lessons for this chapter. All right, I want you to head over to your notebook and complete the questions for this part of the chapter.